introducing myself. I just, who's talking? Okay, so just to let everybody know, we are going to be recording this session so that it can go on the ASI YouTube channel for anybody that misses it. Now I know why the mute's on. Kimberly, I'm getting some feedback from your computer.
Okay, let me mute.
And remute yourself until you have questions. So anyway, I have restarted the recording so this training material can be used later. My name is Kim Sabatka. I'm the Director of Business Development at ASI Food Safety. I am coming up on my 18th year in the food safety industry. I know some of you, and I know some of your level of compliance, and it doesn't matter whether you're new, whether you just took over a position, or whether you've been in the industry a long time. I'm going to briefly go over how to implement a successful training program. And that training program can be geared towards second-party audits, like your customers coming in, third-party audits, global level of audits. It doesn't matter what your level of compliance is. Everybody needs to have a successful training program that's documented. So that's what we're going to cover today. I think since I get feedback noise when you unmute yourself, if you have questions, go ahead and type it in the chat box that's located at the top. It's a little circle with some lines in it. If you open that up, you can see the chat that we've already had prior to you joining. Otherwise, at the end of the presentation, I will open up the floor for questions. And we will, take questions and answers then. And hopefully I go through the material well enough to where you don't have a lot of questions so that you can get back to your lunchtime or whatever else. Okay, so, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to learn how to implement a successful training program. As I said, every food manufacturing, repackaging, manufacturing of packaging material or distribution center should have a training program of some type. And a lot of times the standard that you get your audits to will dictate what that should be. My objective today is to tell you why having a training program is important, the steps on developing a training program, whether you do it or whether you seek an outside source to help you do it, the different steps that are involved in developing the training content, implementing that program, and then the continuous improvement of it. So what needs to be tweaked? Does something need to be moved up? Especially in this time of COVID, training on the cleaning and sanitation or hand washing, we would expect to see probably on a monthly basis, just to make sure you keep your site safe. So those are the learning objectives for this PowerPoint today. Hold on just a moment. Hi, Stacy. Hi, Stacy. I see that you're just starting. We're literally just starting this. I'm going to ask you to mute your mic until the end. And just an FYI, we are recording this so it can go on the ASI YouTube channel. So welcome to the webinar today. Okay, why does one need to have a robust training program? You need to have it so that you comply with local regulations, whether that's a health department, whether it's the FDA, whether it's the USDA, depending on what you fall under or what regulatory body that you fall under. You need to have a robust program to satisfy that. Another reason to have one is it's dictated by third-party standards, whether that be a Gmp basic level of audit or SQF, BRC, FSSC 22000, one of those GFSI global standard audits. Having a robust training program does improve employee retention. Obviously, when you hire somebody and you train them and give them the tools, you're investing in them, to basically support the company in their, path to providing a safe product. So it helps with employee retention. If I'm hired to go in and do a job and there's no training on, work instruction on my specific job, or training on where I can eat and drink, or where I can, go to warm up my food without a problem, that's going to make me be like, well, I'm going to go somewhere that's going to train me a little bit better. Having a training program can reduce safety-related issues, including complaints, whether those are internal or external, non-conformances, recalls, withdrawals, all of those things. So training your people in a consistent manner on the specific items that apply to them and their role within your company can help reduce all of those type of issues. It definitely protects your brand and image. If you've got people in there, chewing gum, having false fingernails that are making something that can snap off, wearing jewelry, not wearing hairnets, all of those things affect your brand and reputation, which is going to affect your bottom dollar. It reduces operational costs through eliminating inefficiencies and waste. And by what we mean is the inefficiencies is if somebody has to go behind an employee that's assigned to do something and they aren't doing it well and somebody has to redo that work. Specifically, something like the cleaning and sanitation. If you haven't trained them to do that, then you're not using your staff efficiently. And then the waste would come into play if you're actually making a product and, something gets into that product going through the manufacturing line, or somebody comes to you and says, oh, I lost my wedding ring, stop production, let's find it. All of those, that would be wasted product, wasted resources. And now, especially with the global standards, food safety culture is a big part of that. So it creates a positive safety culture in terms of, making sure that everybody knows why they're being trained, why you're following GMP regulations, why you're following these SQF policies and procedures, or BRC policies and procedures. So it just creates a positive food safety culture all the way around. Now, let me talk just briefly on some of the consequences if you do not have a robust training program. There could potentially be legal and financial consequences. Specifically, if there's, a massive type recall, or you kill somebody, or you violate some kind of regulation, you can be fined or even shut down. The failure of third-party or second-party audits. Poor employee retention, again, if you're not training them to do their specific jobs, they potentially leave and go somewhere else where they feel like somebody cares about them and the job that they do. Customer complaints and poor brand reputation, recalls and withdrawals, and just, some of you on here I know are different level of compliance in terms of, US regulatory level or GFSI level. I am familiar with several SQF companies that had to have a recall for one reason or another. And it does not jeopardize your SQF certificate or your BRC certificate. There's, recalls inevitably are going to happen. Don't believe that it can't happen to you because the risk is low. It could always happen. And as long as you've got a robust training program along with all of your other policies, procedures, and forms, and everything's documented, then you're covered in terms of, having a recall affect you less. The not having a robust training program has high operational costs with product waste, product that gets held, product that can't be reworked, and that type of stuff. And then it can have a negative impact on your company culture. If management is walking around, you don't train your employees and they're walking around griping about the way somebody's doing their job, that really does have a negative impact on company culture, which not only costs your company money, but it also costs you employees too at some point. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this section is there are minimum requirements to satisfy SQF all the GFSI certifications and just basic CGMP audits, which is the foundation that most companies start with within the United States. Let's talk about HACCP. That's Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. Hopefully all of you have heard that acronym at some point in your life. If you have a GFSI audit, I know you've heard of it. Um, the GMP and some of the GFSI standards require a minimum of one person get a 16-hour HACCP course accredited by the International HACCP Alliance. So SQF, under their newest edition, which is a global audit, does require 2 people on site to have that formal training. So in this particular case, if your site were going to go SQF, you would be required to send 2 people through training, and that's mandatory. Under the BRC standard, well, and also SQF, there is internal auditor training. Now, you can prove competency through work experience, but otherwise there are courses out there that you would take to get additional training for any for whoever you're going to designate as your internal audit. John, as you know, sometimes the internal auditor is going to be the SQF practitioner, or in the, in under edition 9, the backup. Normally we would like to see the internal auditor not be the same person that's trained in HACCP, only because, if you've got one person that's got multiple responsibilities, there should be somebody coming in and following behind them to actually audit the work that they're doing. Food defense, that must be provided to all employees, and that is, how are you going to protect the product that's in your facility from internal and external problems? Whether it's a disgruntled employee, your biggest risk under the food fraud and food defense is an employee that's disgruntled. So everybody needs to be trained on what to be on the lookout for, what you're looking for in terms of minimizing any kind of food fraud or food defense issue. Anybody that works in a processing food, processing of packaging material, or distribution center, or even, growers and grow houses, gap sheds, all of those, anything from the product in the ground through distribution to retail and to the consumer, should have training, when they get hired, as well as on a set frequency. Not because policies change that often, although training should be done after a policy or procedure changes, or you add product, or you change the scope of what you're doing, but more as a reminder. And again, I'm going to use washing your hands as a good example. Obviously everybody's encouraged to wash their hands, quite often during this COVID world that we're living in right now. But we've got flu issues. Somebody goes to the bathroom, somebody eats, and they eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So then there's that allergen risk. So, everybody should be trained that walks through your door, regardless of what role that they're in. So, again, keeping in mind that these are minimum requirements for GMP, SQF, and GFSI level type audits. And then last, PCQI, that's the Preventive Control Qualified Individual. That is a FDA mandate. If you guys remember, it's been a full 10 years ago now that the Food Safety Modernization Act went into play. PCQI is very similar to the HACCP training that we talked about above. And as a matter of fact, in PCQI training, they do cover the 7 principles of HACCP, but the PCQI training and certificate does not satisfy a third party or second party audit. It's totally separate. ASI, NSF, Eagle, all of us auditing companies are separate from FDA and USDA. Those are government agencies. And the FDA decided that the HACCP training did not satisfy the Food Safety Modernization Act requirement. So there is an additional class that which is a 20-hour class that is a minimum requirement for when the FDA walks into your door. They're going to want to know if there is a PCQI individual established, and if that person has had formal training, or is going to try to convince them that industry experience is acceptable. So Stacy, I'm going to go ahead and mute you on my end for just a minute, and then I'll try to unmute you guys at the end. Okay, so sorry about the extra noise. So not only did we cover the advantages of having a training program in place, the disadvantages. Now we've covered the minimum requirements of what GMP, SQF, BRC, FSSC require. So the exception on this is the PCQI. Under a lot of the standards, it's, because they're global standards, there are statements within them that state you'll follow your country's regulatory requirements. I know that SQF, mentions that, as well as our third-party GMP audit. But our auditors also understand that PCQI is very similar to HACCP training, and that HACCP training is actually covered. But what an auditor is going to look for a second-party audit, third-party audit, or global level of audit is going to be the HACCP training, since that's the foundation for all of those types of audits. Okay, let's talk about the steps to developing a training program. And John, I might call you out. Are you still on the call, John? Can you type real quick in the chat box? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to call you out a little bit maybe during this. One of our customers that is actually falls under me, I'm the account rep for, is on the call today. And his site is GFSI level audited. So I know that he's got a strong training program in place. So let's talk about the steps of developing a training program. And again, you can, everybody's got to start somewhere. If you don't have a training program in place, this is going to be available on the ASI YouTube channel. Everybody knows how to look at YouTube. And there's going to be some really helpful information. And then, of course, if you need additional information, I'm going to give everybody my desk phone number before we get off of here. If you have questions, you can let me know. So the first thing you have to do is assess your training needs. So we've already talked about everybody at new hire gets trained, right? And they're going to get trained in basic GMPs, good manufacturing practices, or good distribution practices, whatever the case may be. And you got to determine, okay, what type of training does an HR person need? New hire training is new hire training. Everybody gets it. Obviously, somebody working in a warehouse is going to be different than an administrative person who's going to learn more about maybe software issues versus good manufacturing practices and the do's and don'ts of working in a food or non-food contact packaging or distribution center where, oh, well, wait, we're just a distribution center. It doesn't matter, but you've got product going in and out of there, so it does matter. So the first step is to assess the training needs, determine what kind of training you need to do. The next step that I like to add here is to establish training goals. And that's where you say to yourself or the team working on this, okay, let's decide when we want to have this up and running. Are we going to do training quarterly in addition to new hire? Are we going to do it every 6 months? Are we only going to do it every 12 months, in January, so that everybody gets consistent training? I don't think that there's really a set frequency that you need to have it, other than everyone should have it New Year. And our recommendation is every 3 to 6 months. And I'm not talking about the same training, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to show you a training matrix. And how, some might think is complicated, some might think is easy, might be a good idea for you, might not be a good idea for you, but it's how, how we've consistently seen sites keep track of the training and who gets what training. and how you can mix up that training, to further create that food safety culture that you really want to create, not only to protect the brand and image, but to help with employee retention. So when you're establishing the training goals, determine what do we want to train them on? How often do we want to train them? Who's going to get trained on what falls into step 3. Again, you're not going to train an administrative person on how to work a ink printing machine. You're going to train her on different functions, but she still needs to know about allergens. She still needs to know about washing her hands when she goes to the bathroom. So there's some training that, would be effective company-wide. Determine when you're going to train. When should they be trained? Well, they should be trained when they're hired. They should be trained on your quarterly or every 6-month frequency, whatever frequency that you determine back in step 2. So determine when you're going to training and document it and say, okay, we're going to train employees 1 time a quarter in the 3rd month of that quarter. So March, June, September, and December. Do it on a frequency if you're going to do it 4 times, in addition to that new hire training. Create the training content. So obviously you're going to start with your new hire training that talks about your company, the do's and don'ts, what happens when you walk out into the production area or the distribution center, what happens when you've got a truck loading and unloading, keeping dock doors sealed, just everything that they need to know when they start at your company. So you're going to start with that training content, and then it's going to grow as you go. And as you start getting into creating your training material, you're going to be able to easily use that initial training material, duplicate it, and make changes so that you can write training on how to weave a basket if that's what everybody does on break. You can use the same format for all of your training materials. But you've got to create that at some point, and that's got to be within your timeline. Once the training content is created, you're going to implement it, and you're going to say, okay, effective January 1st, 2022, we're going to implement this training program. Everyone will now be trained on a quarterly basis or every 6 months, or again, whatever that frequency is that you determine. And you can even determine it on risk. There's nothing wrong with having a 10-minute training session where you cover 1 item and do it monthly. I mean, you can do it weekly, however often you want to. And I would definitely look at the risk of your product or process when you keep that in mind. But always remember, when somebody comes in new, you're going to go back to that initial training content. Step number 7, this is all important. Maintain the records. So it's not going to do any good if you hold a group training session and just say, hey, everybody, today we're going to talk about, let's use washing our hands again. That's always a good one, because that can't be stressed enough during this time. Here's the proper ways to wash your hands. We've got these signs everywhere. Does everybody understand? Do I need to have this done in English or Spanish? If they are a Spanish speaking employee, do they understand English? Do I need to have multiple signs placed? Maintain the records, document who's there, document who conducted the training. John, here's where I'm going to call you out. Do you have a designated person that conducts training, or do you have a team? And again, John works for an SQF certified site. They have been certified for several years. Okay, and he's saying that he has a team of people that conducts the training. And then John, who dictates what training they get on what frequency? Is that dictated by your SQF documentation, or has that always been a policy that you've had in place there? Let's give them just a second to answer. I just always find it helpful to get people in the audience involved. at what somebody else does. So maybe that'll give you an idea. Oh, I don't think I can do this myself. Right. And, you've got somebody, one of your peers that's telling you that, they use a team to get people trained. And he's saying it definitely has to be a group effort. So don't feel like this is something that you have to do alone, because it is a continuous improvement type thing. It's ever changing, but your basic steps are always going to be in here. So if you can screenshot my screen right now with your phone and take a picture, these steps are not going to change. Obviously you need somebody to be in charge of saying, okay, we're going to have Tyler, Kimberly, and Rob on our training team. Rob, you're going to worry about the warehouse workers. Kimberly, you're going to worry about the people working on the manufacturing line. Tyler, you're going to worry about admin, or any truck drivers that you've got out driving around. So, get a group involved. Not everybody knows everything. 3 heads are better than one. And the group effort to make sure everybody gets trained is a great way to prove that you've got a strong food safety culture. Okay, so let's go back and talk about assessing your training needs a little bit, because I know on the last slide, the very first step is to assess your training needs. Step one in deciding on what your training needs are to decide on the skill set. What are the skill sets that your team members are required to have in order to do their job properly? So, is it reading and writing? Is it driving a forklift? Is it understanding GMPs? Is it, what skill sets is this person going to need? You've got to take that, into account as for your group overall, if you're going to be on the training team, because there's going to be different skill sets dependent upon what their role is within the company, in the manufacturing side or on the admin HR side. And I like to bring that in because I know with a lot of smaller companies, they will use administrative people to help maintain some of the documents that are involved, because the HACCP coordinator sometimes is the internal auditor who's the practitioner, and you've got people wearing multiple hats. So decide on what those skill sets are, and then determine what they have to have in order to do their jobs properly. Evaluate the skills of your employees. Every perfect star is different. They're all shaped slightly different. We all have different skill sets. We have strong points and we have weak points. So evaluate the skills of your employees. Look at them and evaluate their skill levels in relation to the skills that you've laid out in step one. So when you decide on what the skill set are, then look at each employee individually and see if they have the skill sets to do that job. Maybe you've got somebody assigned an admin that has skill sets that would better, that they would be used better out in the plant somewhere in some kind of capacity. So evaluate the skills of your current employees. Again, we're all different. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, and your goal when you're creating these is to help give everybody the, to build on their skill strength. Highlight what those gaps are. So identify gaps between the skill sets that you said somebody needs and the current level of skills by your team members. So, this can help you determine do you need to talk about allergens? Have they ever heard of allergens before? Did you cover that in your new hire training? What about, your sanitation group, if you've got one? Have they been trained to do their job? Have they been trained on chemicals? So there's a lot involved with identifying what the gaps are so that you can fill in the gaps with the training. And that's kind of important. Now, obviously, there are all different level sizes of companies, whether you've got 5 employees or 500 employees. If you manufacture food, or let's make that even less, say that you manufacture some kind of confectionery product like some kind of candy. Whether you have 5 employees or 500, the skill sets are going to be the same and they're going to be needed. So the training should theoretically be the same. Now, your process might be slightly different, but the skill set to operate the equipment that makes, enrobed candy, like little hard chocolate covered raisins or something like that, the skills are going to be the same for those employees, regardless of the size of the company. If you run into, a question or you don't know where to start, there are companies that can help you do a gap assessment of your training needs. Again, I'm going to give you my number afterwards and we can talk about that a little bit in depth. There's no reason why you guys can't create your own. Once figure out those 8 steps that we covered on slide 6. And again, you're going to be able to refer back to the YouTube channel to look at that, because those steps are not going to change. And it's all about, tweaking your training to match this, to make up the skill set that maybe your employees don't have, and giving them the tools to do their job right. Again, to reduce the bottom dollar of what you're going to lose in product when stuff is messed up and that kind of stuff. So assessing the training needs can be done internally or externally. If you want to find out how to do it externally, you'll call me, sometime after the training. Okay, so the following benefits are the benefits of conducting a training needs analysis. So identify knowledge gaps. So that's, when in the previous slide, when it's like determining what skill sets are. You identify gaps before they become a problem. So the whole goal is to continuous improvement, minimizing recall, and protecting the brand of image of the company that you're doing. Ensure that your training is focused on the right area. I made a joke earlier about a basket weaving training. Obviously, none of you probably do basket weaving at your company, and that was kind of, just a little funny that I threw in there, but make sure that you're training them on the right things. That's an important thing. So knowing what those gaps are important. Plan what your training needs are. Do your timeline on that little snake slide on slide 6 that we went over with the different steps. Use the assessment to plan what your training needs are, and who should attend those training needs. But I also want to add on there that, you also need to determine the frequency and create the content material. And it's okay if it's really basic to start with, and then it gets a little bit better over time, because that's what we want to see. We want to see continuous improvement of all of your programs, and that includes your training program. So I want to highlight training that, not considered sometimes, and that should be considered. Definitely HACCP, if you're going to get any kind of third-party GMP audit or GFSI level audit, HACCP is definitely in the forefront. Internal auditor training, if you don't know how to conduct an internal audit, you can take a class. If you've been in the industry for 20 years and you know how, you don't so much have to take a class, but that should definitely be on your radar, especially for your food safety team. The PCQI training, again, that's an FDA requirement, and there are questions about the country's regulatory that you live in most of the standards that get done. CGMP training, that's a good one. At a minimum, most of your people should be trained in GMP, and I don't mean through a formal training studio. I'm talking about training your team on GMPs broadly at new hire, and then more specifically on an ongoing basis. John, I'm going to call you out again. How often do you train your employees on GMPs? We'll give him just a second to answer. Okay, is there anyone else on the call that can go to the chat box and tell me if you currently conduct GMP training. Okay, so John does it annually and he's still typing, but I'd like to get somebody else's feedback too, if somebody else can type in the chat box. So John does it annually. I'm assuming that he does it when people are hired as well. It looks like Kimberly and Tyler are both typing, so we'll get some other feedback. Annually and through regular team meetings. Okay, and how often are your team meetings, Kimberly? Monthly. Okay, so you do it on a monthly basis. And do you just pick one or two GMPs, or do you talk about all of them? Okay, more for certain teams. Okay, so John said there's certain teams that he works with. Okay, good. So I've got some good feedback, and then I'm gonna relay Tyler's as well, because this is all great stuff. So Kimberly stated that they train on GMPs annually and through regular team meetings, which are conducted monthly. John said that GMPs are done annually and the more often for certain teams. And then Kimberly stated that they cover one or two GMPs during each meeting monthly. That's great news, Kimberly, and that's a good way to do it. And that way, every year you're cycling through the GMPs. Now let's look what Tyler did. Monthly food safety meetings with the whole team. Each month is by topic. Okay, so Tyler, included in your monthly meetings, how often is it specifically related to GMP? Do you ever talk about anything other than GMP? And for Rob and Stacy, I apologize to you both. You're not typing in, and I know I'm stuck on slide 8, but I promise there's only 17 of them, so we are making our way through this. Okay, so Tyler stated GMP every meeting. So, and then just, not to get shot or anything, but if Kimberly and Tyler, if you can both type in the chat box, your current level of compliance. Are you GMP certified, SQF certified? That would be helpful just so that I have an understanding. Okay, so Tyler is GMP and Kimberly is GMP storage and distribution. Okay, great. So we've got at least one SQF site on here and a couple of GMPs. So I am happy to, but Stacy said she's pretty new at the company, here to learn some good information. Well, Stacy, I hope you're learning it, darling, and feel free to call me later and we can talk about anything that new people want to talk about in regards to food safety. So it's overwhelming. And I think back to when I first started in the food safety industry. And I worked here a full 2 months before I ever even knew what we actually did at this company, because I couldn't grasp offering a service to somebody, and then food safety, who thinks about that? So anyway, happy to talk, at any time, Stacy, if you feel like it. And then other training that sometimes is not considered that is very important is food fraud and food defense. So John, one more time, I'm going to call you out on the carpet. How robust is your food fraud and food defense program? And how often do you cover that with your employees? Or is it specifically like just your HACCP team or management that you cover that training with? Again, as I mentioned, probably a full 40 minutes ago, the biggest risk in terms of food fraud and food defense is employees. So I would think that John is going to answer me here, although he must be a slow typer today. I'm just curious how robust his program is. And then, does he exceed requirements of the SQF code, or does he just meet the requirements? And then who he trains in terms of that. So those are just some ideas of training that you don't want to overlook. And then you can pretty much train people on anything at any time. You just have to make sure that it's all documented. So we're going to go on to slide 9 because I'm going to try to be sensitive of your time. Okay, establishing training goals. So we've assessed the needs. Now we're going to establish training goals. There are 7 steps that'll help you establish and meet training goals. And I made this pretty basic because, I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed. I know, the first few times that I, had to write one of these webinars, I wanted to overly complicate it and, try to put everything like I'm speaking right now, try to put everything that I'm saying in a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint ends up being 189 pages long, and then people, are like, well, I can read if you're gonna say all of that and not make it interesting, then just give us the PowerPoint. So it's the same way with training. It can be super simple. Uh, and again, it's going to grow over time as your company grows. Excuse me, but I found that there are 7 steps that you can follow that'll help you stay on track. And these are in addition to the steps to developing an individual training program that we covered in slide 6. So step 1 is identify the why. Begin with the end in mind. And what we mean by that is identify what your goal is, what that training is for. Hold on just a moment. So start at the end. What do you want to accomplish? We want to accomplish training our people in our glass and brittle plastic policy or our allergen program. Begin with what you want that ultimate goal to be. And that's your first step. And that's going to help mold you through the next steps. Align training to the business needs. Obviously, we're all in the food business, so keep it food related. Again, I bring up my little joke about the basket weaving, but don't go off topic. Don't train them in something that they don't need. Your goal is to create a sound food safety culture. You do that by training your employees to make sure that they're protecting your brand and image every day when they walk through that door. Step 3, set SMART goals. And I've got a whole slide on what SMART goals are next, but let's get through these steps. Step 4, achieve small wins with milestones. Step 5 is measuring your progress consistently. Step 6 is make the training goals visible, and step 7 is to celebrate. So step 4, let's talk, achieve small wins with milestones. Every time you get training content created and delivered, that's a small win. The whole idea is to, get your policy in place. What's your frequency going to be? Identify skill sets, let that dictate it. Let the standard of compliance dictate how often training's done. Measure your progress consistency. Is this working? Are we still having people getting written up for not following the policy that's been set or the training that they received? Make the training goals visible. Post them in the employee break room. Post them, sporadically throughout the plant. We find that, a lot of times people are hesitant because of the unknown. Let them know we are going to be doing training, every month. Like one of you said that you do training every month and you cover 2 GMPs monthly with your team. That's great. That spreads it out, keeps it from being boring, because let's face it, a lot of this stuff is boring. It's for a good cause, but it is boring. Make the goals visible. Then they won't have that fear of the unknown. Change has to happen slowly. If you're not training your people, start slowly, keep them abreast of it, tell them why you're doing it to protect the brand and image, make them a part of it. If they feel valued by you giving them the training, you care enough about them as an employee to train them to help you protect the brand and image of your company. Let them get on board with that. It creates that positive culture. And celebrate was just kind of a fun thing to add in there, so. Okay, slide 10, and we're done. I know that we're about to run out of time, but I'll get through these relatively quickly. And then any of you are welcome to call me and talk about it. If you wait 24 hours, this will all be available as a reminder, and hopefully, you know, it has not been so boring that you weren't listening to any of the stuff that went along with this. So establishing the training goals. For goals to be powerful, they should be designed to be smart. So on the last PowerPoint, when I said I would explain what SMART is shortly, now we're going to talk about that. There's many variations, but this is basically what it is. Be specific. Your objectives must be clear and well defined in the training material. Measurable. Without a way to measure your success of these programs, you miss out on the celebration that comes with knowing that you and your team achieved something. So measurable can be through little, even question and answer sessions at the end of your training. Measure how well your team is doing. Maybe, you know, if they're non-conforming and they keep non-conforming on the same issue, maybe you need to change the training material. So it's got to be measurable. Attainable. Make sure that it's possible to achieve the goals that you've set. If you, if you set a goal of having training every week and then you only do it once a month, that is not an achievable goal. So if you're going to set a training frequency, make sure it's something you can attain. Okay, goals, the R stands for relevant. Make sure that they're relevant and aligned with the direction of the business. Again, we're not going to do a basket weaving training course because it's not needed in the food industry. Hold on, I'm getting a tickle in my throat. I got to take a drink. I'm going to mute you for just a moment. I'm so sorry. And then the T in SMART is for time bound. Your goals must have a deadline. When you're working on a deadline, your sense of urgency increases and achievement will come that much quicker. So, you know, obviously you would not create an entire year's worth of training material by January 1st. That would be an unrealistic goal. However, you could say, set your specific goal to be by the end of first quarter. That would give you almost 3.5 months, and that is attainable. So, establish realistic goals on the training material themselves as well as implementing the program, and then stick to it. And, knowing that you've got a 4-month deadline, you can pace yourself to develop that based on everybody's skill set that works there. Okay. Oh, okay, there's 2 stages in the next step about who should be trained when you're developing a training program. And I know this seems like, oh my gosh, this is really weird, but so you've got the path to, during the gap assessment, we've already covered establishing skill sets for the job and establishing skill sets of your employees, and then creating training content for that. Now let's talk about who needs to be trained. Determine who needs to be trained. Which employees are they? What departments are they in? John brought up this earlier. He said, that some people get more training than others there. I'm not going to ask him to elaborate because I know we're running close on time and I still have 5 more slides to go through. But determine what employees and what departments, what teams, what committees, if you've got committees. And again, you're going to think about the sales managers, HR people, finance people. Don't overlook anybody. Everybody should have some type, even if it's just new hire training. Most of the people that you're hiring are going to be 18 or older, so they're considered adult learners. And adult learners learn a little bit differently than second graders, right? So remember that your audience are adults. And then if we take all of the different departments listed above, all employees don't need to be trained on everything. And to John's point, he said some of his employees get trained more than others. So based on what their role is within your company, some may have more training than others. Obviously, you're not going to, train the controller of the company, everything food safety related, although she should know a little bit, just because, if she's working at a food company, she should know a little bit about it. But just remember that all employees don't need to be trained on every training material that you create. Determine based on what's needed to perform their specific job duties. Think about the different types of training, when you're onboarding, compliance training, like HACCP training, job specific training, product knowledge training. I mean, it's all, there's so much that you can expand across, and create training material on and then deliver it, obviously in different ways. And I'm on the next slide, which I'm going to jump to really fast. I believe it's the next slide. We talk about the different platforms. Okay, but this one, okay, I'm sorry. The next one, we will talk about the platforms. This one, I want to go back. I stressed on the last slide, remember that you're adults, and adult learners are different. They need to know why they have to learn this. They have to learn it because management or your HR team is trying to create a positive food safety culture and make sure that all employees feel valued and understand what the goals of the company are, and they're a part of that. Ask your team members what they expect to learn or gain from the training. Here, the one way that you can look at this and how it's potentially advantageous, and I know that we're seeing a huge flux in the industry right now, is, a lot of people as adults like training because they're building their skill sets to potentially set themselves up for some type of promotion. Now, I don't know if everybody on here is a supervisor or not, or if you're part of food safety teams or not, or you're part of HR or not. But, what an employee's response to you is, what do they expect to learn or gain from it? Hopefully, you've created a positive environment and they want to gain knowledge so that they can use that in the future, either to make more money or to get a promotion or to get a position that they'd really like to do at your company. So, they need to be involved in determining what they'll learn. And I don't mean they dictate what it is, but it's okay to talk to them and say, okay, is there anyone here that has a topic that they would like to receive training on that can help us better do our job? As an example, ask the learners to contribute their experiences during the training, kind of like I've done on here. Get everybody involved, get the different opinions, because we know every site is different. And you should know that every site is different too. An employee, hang on just a minute. Stacy, I see you dropped off and you rejoined. That's perfect. I'm talking really fast because I've got 3 slides left and I want everyone to be able to get back to their day. An employee will be motivated to take training if they know it's needed to move up in the company. I just touched on that a little bit. An employee will be more adept at learning if it's helping them in real life problems they face at work. So, say that you've got 2 people standing on the line and one of them's twiddling his thumbs most of the time and the other one's really working. If you're conducting training on, what to do or not to do on the line, or how often you can do it, or how often you can stop, or, maybe it's one of those things where you give everybody an extra 10-minute break if they do such and such consistently for the next 4 hours until break time, even if it's something small like a 5 or 10-minute break or some kind of recognition. So, adults are oftentimes different type of learners than what an actual child would be. Some are motivated by the self-satisfaction of getting the training, while others might be motivated by rewards or recognition. So, hey, shift 1 manufactured 6,450 chocolate bars on their shift today. Well, shift two's goal is to do 6,460 to beat that, reward and recognition for a job well done. That's going to be important. Okay, determining when they should be trained. All employees should be trained on a task before they're assigned to complete the task. Obviously, you don't throw them out there and say, figure it out. They should be trained on basic GMP or GAP principles before they ever walk into the processing or grow area. It should occur whenever there are significant changes to processes or procedures, or dictated by your policy or your customers or the standard that you're audited to. Refresher training shall be done at a minimum of annually, but can be more frequent based on the topic and the company needs. For example, if your facility has an issue with employees not washing their hand at the appropriate frequency, hand washing might be done each month. So you can basically write your own ticket on what you're going to train on, as long as it applies to your site and as long as it covers everybody in the company, and as long as you're doing it when you're saying you're doing it and you're documenting it. Corrective training should be done whenever a root cause analysis in response to a non-conformance identifies training as the root cause. So, product loss could be, an example here. Somebody put in cups of salt instead of tablespoons of salt in a batch of product and it's destroyed. Well, did they not have the adequate training for that? So corrective action training is training that can be done anytime, and it's the result of a non-conformance to something. Okay, creating the content. Obviously for HACCP training, for PCQI training, those are accredited trainings. So those are going to be done by a third-party training company. The other courses, you got to determine if you're going to do them live and in person, if you're going to create webinars for them, if you're going to use a training platform like an e-learning type thing. Where are you going to hold the training? And the mode of training doesn't matter because every company is different. I've stated that multiple times. Provide a copy when possible in the correct language of bullet points to your people so that they can keep that as a reminder, and then document. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And that should go for everything, not just training. And the more you document everything, the less apt you are to get any kind of non-conformance if you're just used to documenting everything. Okay. When you're creating your training course, follow these steps. I'm just going to read the bullets really quick because we are out of time, and I've got the training matrix page that I want to show you to give you a couple of ideas of how you can keep track of this. Define the goals and objectives, determine who your audience is, determine the learning management system or content creation tools that are needed. Those are only needed if you're going to create online courses. We use a training platform called Litmos. It's held outside of here. So, obviously you don't have to have, everything within this, but this is just something that if your marketing team does you can utilize. Conduct research and work with subject matter experts to develop content if needed. Create a storyboard and a script. Put the content together and record the training, and then add assessment and knowledge checks. Remember, we want you to be able to measure the results of the training. So whatever that is, even if it's a question answer at the end of your training and you spot pick people, ask them questions, make sure that they understand. Additional things to think about when you're creating training courses. And don't let courses scare you. It can use it training material. I like the word material better than courses, because a course to me means that it's an 8-hour or 12-hour or 20-hour course, where these are trainings that need to be conducted to your employees. You can utilize technology, include pre-test, post-test, quizzes and exams. Use real life examples. I love that one. Include activities if it's beneficial to the learner. Do you want to do a role play? Do you want to, make a game out of it? Tell, show, practice, model. So basically you determine how the training's done. Hopefully it's not serious 100% of the time, especially with adults. Again, if you bring them in and give them the knowledge of why they're doing something, you're going to get better results. And the last thing I want to show you is this matrix, and I hope everybody can see it really good, maintaining the training records. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. For those of you that already get audits, that's the case with everything. Make sure you're keeping thorough training records. That covers the company and it covers you as the training coordinator or one of your team trainers or, however you're structured. They should include who was trained, the date of the training, who the trainer was, and the qualifications. And then John, I'm going to ask you a question in just a minute. So if you're like playing Yahtzee or something, stop for a second. Let me get through this and then I'm going to ask you a question. Who is the trainer and what is their qualification and what is included in the training, including any links to training materials. That's only if you're going to do some online stuff, obviously links to training material, unless everybody's got a login where they can get to like your server and pull, training module 1 or training module 2, etc. John, who do you determine is the trainer and do you have basic qualifications for those trainers? We're going to get John's question and then we're going to look in detail at the matrix and then we're done. So if you guys have 3 more minutes, we'll get through this and then you can always go back and look at it later. Okay, so John must be in the middle of a hot game of Yahtzee. So let me go on and talk and maybe he'll answer while we're going through this. So these are 2 different types of training matrices. It doesn't have to be complicated. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. So basically, in this first box, this one here, I hope you can see my mouse. It's got the department. You can break it up by departments, and then you would list all of your people's name. Okay, let's look at the key at the bottom. The key at the bottom says every white box on here, including the backups and workers 1 through 10, have no skills present. If it's red, they can do the skills with help. If it's yellow, they can perform most functions alone. 3 is a high level of confidence, and 4, they're a trainer. So if you look up here, these are all the skills, and this is the matrix that tells you where they're at. If there's a lot of white boxes, whatever those skills are, you can create content for that. So this is one training matrix that can be used. And then this one on the right of the screen, I hope it's on your right as well. This is the training matrix that I'm used to seeing. It lists everybody's name, when they started, what their role is, and then like the introductory training, like their start date, and then all of the different training that gets done. So, you can go A through Z on this Excel sheet and then AA, BB, CC. I mean, it can go on infinity with the different types of training. Again, it doesn't need to be complicated. You probably shouldn't do more than 24 types of training, I wouldn't think, or you're going to be super, super busy, and it would take you a full year to cycle through those. So you can highlight it by who missed it, who attended it, who's late for it, and that kind of stuff. And then if you look up here, you can also list when the refresher is. So if this is one of those situations where if you can take a picture of this with your phone, if you like the way that looks and is set up, you can always call me later and we can talk about, actually helping you set one up that's applicable to your site. So we are way over on time. I am so sorry about that. If you have a question and you want to type it really fast, I'll answer for those of you that need to go to get back to your job. That's fine to drop off too. 2 things. This is available 48 hours from now on the ASI YouTube channel. You can rewatch it with sound. And then number 2, if any of you would like to call me directly just to chat about any part of this at all, and I can help you in any way understand it. My direct line at work is 314-333-6207. Thank you all very much for attending, and thank you for those that responded to me so that everybody else kind of had an idea. And I hope that you all have a great rest of day and a super happy holiday.